am very honored to welcome you to this great session on behalf of Women in Tech and SAP Business Women Network. I would like to start sharing that our hearts are with all of the people affected by COVID-19. With this session, we would like to create awareness about why diversity and inclusion are important to overcome this COVID-19 crisis. My name is Galdos, and next to my role as brand manager at SAP, I'm a very proud member of SAP Business Women's Network and community leader of Women in Tech in the Netherlands. I am moderating this session together with my colleague Evelyn Jessurun. And Evelyn is senior developer at SAP and member of SAP Business Women's Network. We are very proud to introduce you our experienced and diverse group of speakers from different nationalities and and with different visions, with all of them with a common interest: embed diversity and inclusion in our organizations and in our governments, in order to create equal opportunities to adapt, recover, and progress for everybody. Representing the collaboration between Women in Tech and SAP Business Women Network, I would like to introduce you Dr. Cara Antoine, who is President and Chairwoman of Women in Tech in the Netherlands. And Cara will tell us about the role of Women in Tech and why do we need to be more human than ever. Marjet Wijn is head of platform and technology and lead of Business Women Network in the Netherlands. And Marjet will share with us about the role of SAP, Business Women Network, and how to become a successful woman in the technology industry. Please also welcome our esteemed panelists and the diversity and inclusion experts, Josefine from Zanten. Josefine is a global head of diversity and inclusion at IMD. And Josefine will tell us how to accelerate the diversity and inclusion learning curve. Tanja Kaufmann is people and culture and diversity and inclusion lead at SAP. And Tanja will share her vision on diversity and inclusion, and also will be answering the question, is there a silver lining? And last but not least, Lucia Gutierrez, talent management and diversity and inclusion expert, will share about why an inclusive leadership needs to be embedded in the organizational culture to recover and rebuild from COVID-19. Together, we will take care about this session for you, so please enjoy. And now I will hand over to Evelyn.
Thank you, Grace. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our session this evening, actually, well, in the Netherlands, yes. I feel honored to be part of this inspiring global event. I'm a real techie, so this is my first ever experience participating in such an event, so bear with me. Firstly, before we start, we would like to get to know the audience. And for that, we prepared some polls. So if you could take your phone or go to website slido.com and use the event code that you will see on your screen, then we can start the first question. Because this is a global event, we were very curious about where you're all joining us from. So with that, I'll start the first question. And when the question is showing, the QR code is also still showing you, so you can still scan the code. And I'm really curious. Well, oh wow, really nice. Wow, represented from all these different countries. So welcome everyone. Good to have you in our session. And with that, I want to introduce you to the first speaker. Welcome, Dr. Cara Antoine.
Thank you very much, Evelyn. And I'd appreciate if you can share the slides for me on my behalf.
Yes.
And as we're bringing those up, I want to invite everyone who's joining maybe for the first time this conference this evening. We have been live since yesterday, a little after midnight in the CET time zone, so Central European time. And wow, this has been an amazing event so far. And we still have, well, a few more hours to go. I think still another 7 or 8 hours to go in terms of the content. And I don't know how you've experienced, but I've been just completely blown away by the panel discussions. We've spoken with princesses. We've spoken with people of ministries, of industries. We had a wonderful male panel, CEO panel. Discussions are on healthcare, and just a range of topics has just been really mind-boggling. I think it's going to take me a few days, not just to catch up on my sleep, but actually to absorb all of the incredible conversations that we've gotten to have over this big part of the day. And there's still more to come. So I'm really honored to be here. And I thank all of you for being here with us, because it's so important, particularly in this time, that we connect with each other. And in fact, that we really look for those human connections. And, you know, one thing that I have experienced in today's event in itself is this would have perhaps never been possible in a pre-COVID-19 time. I feel that we've had in greater reach at a larger scale. There are some 4,300 individuals that have registered for the conference as of now. And I think that we've had more intimate discussions as a result of being able to get into these different sessions together and really converse with each other on a very intimate level. And so it's been an incredible opportunity to be a part of this, and really just really fantastic for so many reasons. So what I'd like to do is share with you a little bit about our movement of women in tech, because I'm not so sure if you've heard about that yet throughout the day, and maybe you've had some impressions. We are a global movement with nearly 17,000 individuals registered around the world. And yes, I represent the Netherlands, where we're close to 2,000 individuals registered who be a part of this great movement. And we're here really to serve two missions. We want to close the gender gap. It's so critical. We have less than 20% in some countries, and in the Netherlands, the low 20% of women who are in tech roles, and particularly in leadership roles in technology. And we want to help women and girls to embrace the field of technology, whether they're in a course of study or they're moving in their career. It is so important that we can have women at the table and be taking up space, as we have themed this conference today. What I've certainly seen in this COVID time that we're in right now is that companies that are considering diversity and that are really putting diversity at the center of the looking for solutions and bringing creativity and being innovative in this time of the crisis are those companies that are getting ahead and that are having greater outcomes than those that are resistant to the change or unable to see new solutions and consider new solutions, perhaps in many ways because they lack diversity of thought. And so what I would like to share with you is how we have thought about putting together the chapters of women in tech. And on the next slide, what I would like to just depict here is the alignment that we have with the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. So we chose 5, and the goal number 5 itself, in fact, is all about gender equality and having women at the center. The other 4 goals are those that you can see here on the chart. And what we've essentially said is we want to have impact, and we'll do that in this next 10-year period, which is in line with the Sustainable Development Goal program of the United Nations. To make it very concrete, when I look at a space like entrepreneurialism, what we want to do is create more space for role models in the organization. So I don't know about you, but as I was growing up, I had a few role models in my life, and they weren't people who I personally could know or could get in touch with. I think about Ada Lovelace, who of course is in the technology world, one of our first coders. And I was really in admiration of her growing up, but not somebody I could really touch. Another individual was Helen Keller. And then I think about Jane Goodall and Amelia Earhart. These were my role models but they were far away and they were not women that I could talk to per se, but they did definitely inspire me. And so what I want to do is ensure that we've created role models out of each and every of us in order to be able to get closer and understand what was the person faced with in terms of their challenges? What did they fail at? What are they doing well? What is it they're so great in from a technology perspective, but also what makes them a great human? And to really think about those attributes of being a great human being, which makes for a great role model, and in fact, also a great person in business. I'm looking forward to the day that we don't talk about women in business and women in tech, but we just talk about great leaders that are in tech and in business. So our role model program is one that I'm very proud of. And in fact, we'll be running another session of that from September to December. So for those that are interested to get on board with us and learn about those attributes and your own personal brands and what it takes to become the best version of yourself and a great leader, then that's a program that you may very well want to join us on. We also offer a pitch program, which is for entrepreneurs who are looking at starting and scaling up their business. So having that stage presence and thinking about, okay, how do I pitch this idea? And then also making the full circle to getting you connected to a venture capitalist. And then last but not least, just to mention 3 for now, in the education space, we're connecting women to educational opportunities as the opportunity to get a scholarship in a master's course of study in data science and in data analytics. And we're working with universities all over the Netherlands and around the world in order to offer these opportunities to women. So I'd like to introduce you very briefly to the tribe that we have here in the Netherlands, and all of these amazing individuals and these incredible faces that you see on this chart are those who are at the closest part of the core of our tribe for the Netherlands. I am absolutely honored to be able to run this organization with 2 other fantastic colleagues of mine, Carina de Meijer and also Lieke Lam. And it is a tremendous honor for me to get to work with these ladies who are bringing such incredible experience and their network and their knowledge and their passion for all women in tech. Carina also happens to be our Chief Commercial Officer at the Global Women in Tech. And perhaps those of you who have tuned in today have heard her across multiple sessions and doing a fabulous job there. And Lieke is an incredible individual in the world of media and journalism. And you may often see her on television, where in fact I had the great honor to be on her Trend Watcher TV program yesterday to get to talk about this world tour. And we have, as Grace introduced herself, our community leaders. We have individuals looking after our partners and sponsorships, a team of incredible and very passionate people like Rita and Mariska Kaneka in our media and communications team with Nelly and Adriana. And of course, looking after our programs with Hajar and Emmy. It's a fantastic group of individuals and we're always looking for help. So I invite anyone that feels a passion to want to volunteer your time for a good cause to help us get even more women excited about the field of technology. Please get in touch with me and link up or tweet me, whatever you would like to do to get in touch and show your interest. So in the final slide, as I want to be sure that I save time for these incredible panelists, I wanted to really highlight 3 areas in particular where I feel that it's so important to be more human than ever, because there are some inequities that are appearing because of COVID-19, and particularly in these areas of women, digital and social inclusion, and accessibility. I think there's a huge impact on women in many ways, which is more apparent, where we do understand that most small businesses are owned by women. And when those businesses are not operating and women are at home, they're being impacted. We unfortunately also see a downside of cases of abuse, where through domestic violence and women who are at home with their abusers is on the rise and has become a tremendous impact in the time of this crisis. And we also see that women are needing to take on multiple functions at home. So thinking about the homeschooling and the household chores, as well as doing their own jobs. So there are some inequities that are being created there for women. And I certainly don't want that this crisis leads us to another crisis. If I think about the digital inequities and inclusion that's lacking is, from a technology perspective, not everyone has access to Wi-Fi and have enough computers in their home in order to get everyone connected in the first place. And so these inequities in some households today are things that we need to look at from a leadership perspective of how do we ensure that we find the right equity in ensuring that no one is left behind. And last but not least is in the space of accessibility, which is a very important topic, I believe, in my side, where the need to have a conversation like this, including undertitles or subtitling in the conversation, I think is vital. Having a speech-to-text capability, being able to offer translation capabilities for people who are now in a virtual space and may not speak the same language as these global organizations could offer. And last but not least, I think the importance of ensuring that all we do as we look at how our businesses will evolve post-COVID to ensure that we're creating access and keeping our environments accessible for empowering every person and in every organization on the planet to achieve everything that they want to do in work and in life. So with that, a brief introduction from myself, and you're going to have a treat of a fantastic group of panelists. There are a number of links here on this last slide to remind you of how to find us at womenintech.org on the internet, on LinkedIn, and join our Slack conversation with more than 17,000 people around the world. It's a fabulous, energizing, inspirational environment to be part of. And I wish you an enjoyable rest of the session here today. And get in touch with us, stay in touch with us, and let's be sure that we can be more human than ever. Thank you. I think what I'd like to do now, in fact, is I'm going to hand over to Marjet Wijn. And so, Marjet, if I may hand the podium over to you to continue the conversation.
Thank you, Cara. Thank you for your wonderful introduction. And let me start with the fact that me, as the leader of the Business Women Network in the Netherlands, I'm very proud that we can have this session today with Women in Tech and SAP. And it's just absolutely an honor. And what am I going to do today? Well, Tara, you touched very good topics, and like the role model, like how are we running business as a women, and how can we become leaders instead of we have female leaders and leaders as men. And that's what I'm going to try to explain to you on how are we doing that within SAP. First, start a bit high over what is diversity within SAP globally, and then get a bit more in detail within SAP the Netherlands and what the team is doing there. But in the end, I think what's also very important is that with that Business Women Network team in the Netherlands, we are trying to achieve something, and that is to support women in technology to make them successful and make them feel supported. And what I'm going to explain is, from my own perspective, what is working and what can support you in your journey to that. Before I'm going to do that, let me shortly explain why I'm here and what I'm doing. I'm already working for 12.5 years at SAP. I'm started as a consultant, probably more of you, then moved to a project manager role. Then I thought, okay, when I'm implementing it, can I also be a sales? And it seems to be that I could. So I started selling the SAP software, and now I'm leading the platform and technology team of SAP the Netherlands. And that team has quite some men, but also some women. And it's really good to see how a real diverse team works the best with each other. So, and I think that is, in the end, why we are all here. How can we bring the best out of people? So, Evelyn, can you go to the next slide for me, please? When you look to SAP globally, diversity is very important. SAP sees this as critical for our success. When you look to the kind of people that we have 150 nationalities. We have 26% women in management roles, and this is only growing. And it's so very important that all people are feeling comfortable in such an organization when you want to go to achieve the same goal in the end. When you look to the focus areas that we have within SAP for diversity, there are three. One is we have inclusive career journeys. So we provide employees with their uniqueness and bring them the expectations that they can grow. So you can really be yourself, and we want to support that. An example of that is that we have a Women in Watch program. So within SAP, there are, I think, 50 women selected who are being guided into their journey of their career. They will get a coach, they get somebody who is supporting them, they get trainings, etc. As long as they really feel supported in setting their steps in their journey. The second part is the inclusive culture. It's very important to have leaders that feel accountable and strong to create a culture and make people feel welcome there. This counts for women. This also counts, of course, for men. And as last topic for the global diversity is the diverse ecosystem. We know that we are all working in technology, and in that technology sector, it's very important to have inclusion in your organization. One of those examples that we are working on within SAP is autism. We have had a program where we hired people who are having autism to really bring them to SAP, to open the world for them and feel they're comfortable. And this program is still running and very successful. So this was on a global perspective. When you then get a bit more into the Netherlands, we are working there with a great team of 7 women to the Business Women Network. And I'm very proud that I can lead this fantastic team. What are we doing there? So each year we sit together and we think of what's now our mission that we would like to bring for this year into the organization. And for this year, so for 2020, we have chosen to say we want really to empower women to embrace technology and to succeed there in their career at SAP. Why is that so important? We want to bring, if you are a consultant, if you are a sales, if you are an assistant, doesn't matter. We want to bring everything to feel you comfortable and make you able to grow. And we define 3 goals. The first goal is support women in their career. Think of, for example, mentoring programs. So we already mentored 70 women within SAP the Netherlands. That means that we ask people of the management team of SAP the Netherlands to guide 1 or 2 people in that year, women, and to set goals for them to discuss monthly the progress. And the really great thing is, when you look to that list of 70 women, I think that 80-90% of that women already made a step in their career. And it really feels that they have the possibility to make this step. And I think that that's something to be very proud of. The second goal is grow together, learn, support, and lift each other up. Why is this so important? What are we, for example, doing? We are organizing inspiring success stories. So we had, for example, a female member of the parliament visiting us and interviewing her how she is doing her job in the Netherlands. Or a professor who was an expert on artificial intelligence and customer experience. And we heard on how is she working with technology on the one hand, but on the other hand also how is she running her job and in the same time being a mom, in at the same time having friends, traveling, etc. And it's really interesting to bring those role models up, as also Cara mentioned, in order to learn and give people self-confidence. And as last goal, we are busy within SAP the Netherlands to challenge gender equality. What we did last year is focusing on how can we engage gender neutral recruiting. So how are we able to bring more job descriptions that not only men but also women like? How can we change the job process? So, for example, we said, okay, in case there is a woman in this coming up for a vacancy, there always will be one round with another woman from SAP on the table to ask questions, to let this person feel confident in order to really show that SAP is bringing also a diverse organization. One other example, also a funny one, is that we organized the Daddy Bring Your Daughter Day last year. What did we do? We asked dads with children, girls in the age of 12 to 15, to come over to SAP and to have a great technology session, a deep dive, design thinking, building some things with their daughter. And we achieved two things with that. One is, girls who are really interested in technology. And secondly, dads who become much more aware of the fact why diversity is important. So in the end, touch the whole inclusion part. When you look to what we are trying to set, then in the end, it's important that you take everything by the hand and also step up to become successful yourself. And what's needed for that? In my opinion, when you really want to make that step in your career, you need to step up. And maybe, Evelyn, you can set up the next slide. So on the one hand, with Business Women Network, we are trying to give everything that's possible to make you successful, but in the end, of course, you need to do it yourself. And how or what could help? And this is a more personal perspective. One is it's always important to have the right sponsors. You need to have an example, a female example from leadership that supports you, but also somebody who is really challenging. I asked a person, a management team guy, who is really the opposite of me, to coach me in things where I was not good in. And it really absolutely helped. Then the second one, what I think is important, is we as women shouldn't be shy. When a man is going to go for a job, they say, "Hi, I'm the right man. You need to take me." A woman is going to ask questions. Do you really think that I should am able to do this? I'm not having all the competences you're asking, etc. And that's something that where we and you are really responsible yourself to act for that. You really need to step up, and you are good as the way you are. The third thing is you need a great team next to you. Today, all my Business Women Network ladies are also in the call, and I'm very proud to have them around. But also my own team that I'm managing, the platform and technology team. It's so important that you are working very closely with them, but also that you are able to put them in their strength. To honor your team, then you get really the best out of them and out of them. And that's, in my opinion, why I'm so super proud also of the Business Women Network team in the Netherlands. Then, what I also think is important, that we as women need to be a role model. You need to be aware of the fact that every day you're standing up, you are an example for your daughter, for your niece, for your colleagues, etc. Within SAP, I'm trying to coach, for example, new academy sales that's starting, especially female women, to bring them and explain them why it is so important to stand up and to give them confidence. And as last topic, of course, in my opinion, you need to do something back for the organization. We are used to get a lot, but we also should do something back for people. Just to bring somebody a smile will change the world. I will end my presentation with a thank you for the women in tech, Grace and Evelyn, great for your organization. Enjoy the day, and please, Evelyn, I want to hand it over to you.
Sorry, thank you, Marjet. Thank you for your wonderful presentation. Just now the bell is ringing, sorry. We don't have time for the second poll, so I will introduce the first speaker of the panel, Josefine from Zanten, special guest from IMD. By the way, Josefine, congratulations on your recent recognition and award for inspiring women worldwide. So I hand over to you now, Josefine, and we will switch.
Okay, thank you very much for this very kind introduction, and it's a huge honor to be part of this exciting event. Thank you for having me. And what I'd like to talk to you about is how to accelerate the diversity and inclusion learning curve. But before we start, I want to acknowledge that in this room, in this virtual room that connects us across the globe, people may have been affected directly by this pandemic, and I wanted to let you know that my heart goes out to you. So let me start on a positive note, because we are seeing some societal norms being challenged. More attention is being given to inequalities about age, gender, ethnicity, LGBTQ. Remote working has expanded in areas that were fiercely opposing it, such as banking. We do know from experience that generally speaking, women will benefit more from working at home. But in some instances, we're also seeing people speak up about inequalities. And I think the societal norms that have been challenged in the end may result in positive changes for all. But the truth is that the COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated D&I inequalities that were already there. For example, in Italy, what we've seen is that every single night, the government came to the TV and spoke to the nation. And during these conversations, the only woman present was the sign language interpreter. At the same time, the commission that was gathered with authoritative figures to help the government reopen parks and schools didn't have one woman in it. And this is especially glaring because in Italy, more than 50% of doctors are women, more than 75% of the nurses are women, and especially the 3 people who were able to isolate the virus in the beginning were women researchers. A little bit further in the UK, what we're seeing is that the PPE equipment doesn't always fit all women. This means that 77% of the National Health Service is walking around with equipment that doesn't fully fit. And the reason is that it was designed in a unisex manner, meaning it was based on the shape and form of an average male. A little bit further to the east in Europe, what we're seeing is that in Hungary, to fight the pandemic, the Hungarian government has now decreed that transgender people do not exist. Very close to us in Paris, in France, a very awaited vote, a lift on a ban was expected to go through last week, and it has now been postponed again. This vote or this ban doesn't allow single women or lesbian couples to access medically assisted procreation. I think it's helpful to note that this is available to heterosexual couples, married or not. And last but not least, what we are seeing in the US as well as in the UK is that Black people are dying at the rate of 3 in the US and 4 times in the UK more than white people. So I asked myself, when was the last time that we saw such inequalities percolate to the surface? In our last 20 years, when did we face such difficult moments? And for me, the recession of 2008 came to the surface. In 2008, I was the Chief Diversity Officer for Royal Dutch Shell. And like many other industries, what we were seeing was mass reorganizations across industries, across the globe, on all continents. Salaries were cut, bonuses were stopped. Managers were asked to cut their teams if they were not eliminated by 10, 15, 20, or even more %. Yeah, and some departments were actually closed down or totally outsourced. And what we saw was that exclusive behaviors surfaced. Keeping those who are like you prevailed. Exclusion clearly was led by the in-group, definitely unconsciously, but it did take place. Protecting your own just came forward. And in an environment like Shell, where diversity and inclusion was and still is extremely mature, this was very quickly recognized, and we addressed it. So what we did in Shell, and these are lessons learned, and this is know-how that exists, and I'm not saying only Shell has this know-how, many other leading corporations in the area of diversity and inclusion have these skills already in-house. What we saw very early by analyzing the attrition data based on gender and age and nationality and ethnicity, we saw that more women than men were losing their jobs. We saw that some ethnicities over others were losing their jobs. And we raised this very quickly to the executive committee. Peter Wozer's CEO at the time said, we cannot allow this to take place. We've worked very hard to get where we are in terms of diversity and inclusion. And so we had carte blanche to take on initiatives to help and support line managers. We communicated our D&I objectives again. We held managers accountable to lead with inclusion. We set up selection boards. These selection boards assisted line managers to make sure that we were not regressing in our D&I numbers. And so before final nominations were public, we actually had to revisit them. And only then were they communicated. Now, of course, we had to design toolkits in a very tangible, accessible, and simple way to help our managers. We told the D&I stories again. We used images. We rediscussed a business case. And especially, we stressed why diversity and inclusion in difficult times is even more important than when things go well, because it remains key to reflect your customers and stakeholders and partners. And we were lucky to have 48 ERGs across the globe. These networks helped us obtain a pulse in the organization, and we collaborated with them to make sure that they disseminated all the necessary information, both to line managers, but also to their members. Our aim, incidentally, was at a minimum to walk out of the recession with the same numbers as we did before. And Harvard at the time thought that that was pretty interesting what we did in Shell, and designed and wrote 2 business cases about it. I took the liberty to place the link here for those of you who might be interested to read it. There are some fairly interesting details that were highlighted as to what different and creative things we did at the end, but I'm not going to spoil the answer other than say we were successful. Led me then to the question, should we accelerate the D&I learning curve between the private and the public sector? And whilst I want to recognize the United Nations and their sustainability goals, I want to talk about the EU and the EU Commission and their gender equality initiatives. But I do think that individual governments could greatly use the know-how of the private sector to accelerate the D&I learning curve. And so what can be done? Well, First of all, governments can proactively inquire with the corporations in their countries and ask, what tangible steps and measures did you take? Organizations can share the best practices and accelerate that learning curve to eliminate the inequalities that we keep seeing today. And especially governments need to talk about not just the business case of having a diverse workforce, but the moral case, and how you link that with a GDP growth, country well-being, and happiness. Of course, we talked about inclusion a little bit earlier at high level, and I mentioned that organizations can define what inclusive leadership is and what it is not, and the direct impact on business results by including all constituents and how it increases not just engagement, but also productivity. Who should be doing this? I think, humbly speaking, the executive board has informal and formal networks they can use, heads of finance, innovation, external comms, sustainability, and always in collaboration with the D&I office. Why? Well, it is my humble opinion that we can help accelerate some governments' D&I learning curves and transfer these proven D&I know-hows and skills and benefit society at large and all its members. And now really is the time. And I'll close with a quote from Maya Angelou. You may not control all the events that happen to you, but you can decide not to be reduced by them. And I would like to say that, of course, we cannot control what the pandemic throws at us these times, but we can decide to share and participate know-how and decrease inequality that we see today. So I want to thank you for listening, and I will immediately hand over to Tanja Kaufmann.
Thank you so much, Josephine. Excuse me, and hello everyone. I'm Tanja Kaufmann. I'm leading diversity and inclusion for one of the largest software development units at SAP. And I'm very passionate about D&I, diversity and inclusion. I've been in leadership roles in D&I for about 10 years now. And I think it probably has to do with the fact that I've experienced the highs and lows of living many years in 3 different countries: Germany, the US, and Mexico. So I'm really very honored to be here, and I'm very thankful for the invitation from Grace and Evelyn. And today I would like to share with you my view on different aspects of diversity and inclusion in times of Corona, but also kind of looking at both sides of the coin to see if there isn't some sort of silver lining after all. And some of the things have already been said by Cara and by Josephine, and I'll be building on some of this. So I will take the opposite way. I'll start with the kind of the challenges view. And I think Cara touched upon it a little bit, and Josephine also. I think what might sometimes be dormant just underneath the surface in a society often breaks free during a crisis. I was saying that I think underlying prejudices in societies can become really extremely heightened when people are already predisposed to fear each other or to not trust each other. We've already heard some examples from Josephine and from Cara, but I think there's many more examples that you can find on the news of this. I think one of the most common ones is discrimination, right? Discrimination is happening, and one of the common ones that we hear about is hate crimes against Asians. They've definitely gone up. In the US, I think they were almost down to 0 over many, many years of hard work. They've gone up, but not just in the US, in other parts of the world too. And they range really from verbal abuse to threats to actual physical violence. But the same is happening to other minority groups. One article I read was about South Korea. So we all know they were really good at getting the cases of corona outbreaks down. But recently there was another surge in sort of a virus eruption. And it happened in an area of Seoul that caters to the LGBT community. There's bars and clubs and restaurants. And although especially in Seoul, there is a thriving gay community, and the city is in some parts even openly catering to the gay clientele, this outbreak immediately unleashed backlash and hate speech against the gay population. So many reported that they live in fear and that they don't want to get tested out of fear of backlash. So again, we see what, it's slumbering underneath. If there's a crisis, it breaks free. But discrimination is not really the only issue. There's many others. One that's really struck me, and Cara touched upon it, and I see it happening in Germany, is that traditional role models are popping up again. So in Germany, and I know Angela Merkel has been one of the great female leaders to lead us through the crisis, and she's had an amazing strategy. Nonetheless, there's a very heated discussion going on in Germany right now about traditional gender roles. And some people are saying that really the entire Corona strategy of Germany is resting entirely on the shoulders of women. And I think it's kind of true, actually. The traditional role of women behind the stove as homemakers is still very, very much ingrained in the German culture, and even in the political system. So there's some truth to this. And we see, for example, schools are the last thing to open in Germany, whereas in Denmark, schools and kindergartens were the first thing to open. So this kind of shows that they're relying mainly on the women to, to do the homeschooling and take care of the kids. Another one that I find personally very interesting is privilege. It's a very present topic during Corona, and Josephine also already touched upon it. The one example that I have been really appalled by is African Americans, which Josephine already mentioned, are having a higher infection rate, even though they're in the minority, and they're also having higher death rates. Other things we're seeing in terms of privilege, and this is kind of speaks to my quote on my slide, is also that children from lower income and migrant households are being left behind. So we see the divide between rich and poor is getting wider in times of Corona. And things like homeschooling, for example, if you don't speak the native language or at all, is really difficult, and it's already putting, I mean, we've been in lockdown for almost half a year now. By the time school will maybe start again, in Germany at least, will put kids far behind the others. So I've often, since the crisis started, heard talk about that we need to focus on the important things during Corona, and saying, oh, diversity inclusion programs can kind of be moved to the back burner because we're fighting the crisis and we need to do the firefighting first. But I think these examples show really well, and you can look in the media, they're there every single day, and they're proof enough that right now D&I awareness and considerations need to be more relevant than ever and should not be forgotten. In fact, they should be part of the firefighting programs that are being looked at by organizations and by companies. Nonetheless, and now I'm moving to the more positive aspect of things, I'm a big fan of not seeing things purely in black and white, right? I think most things are much more complex than they seem. The media loves to present things as good and bad, black and white. I think things aren't always that straightforward. And in that spirit, I also think in some ways, there's definitely a silver lining and some positives coming out of the crisis with respect to Corona. So while obviously I take all the issues I just named and that my co-speakers already have named very, very seriously, and I don't mean to downplay any of it, I have seen a silver lining on some levels, and I want to name 3 points. Virtual working can also provide new opportunities to underrepresented groups. I've seen this with our women at SAP, for example. In fact, we've seen a slight increase of part-time women increasing their time now during Corona. It's not a trend yet, but we have seen a slight increase. And I think it has to do with the fact that, before part-time women, they had to leave at 12 on the dot to pick up their kids. Now, they can have calls all day long. The kids are at home, so they can have much more chance or opportunities to be involved in the conversations if they're happening in the afternoon, for example. So there is a flip side to virtual working, and it's helping women in some way also. Another one that I'm seeing really, really magnified is that the virtual working mode is leveling the playing field. On the one hand, virtual working has divided us, but on the other, it's really created this level playing field. It's reducing borders. And on top of it, we have this newfound feeling of solidarity across the world, right? So I think this is something we need to treasure and to keep with us even after the crisis. So for example, at SAP, and I'm sure it's that way in many other companies, it's the headquarters is the place to be, right? If you're in any location outside the headquarters, no matter what ethnicity or culture or country, you're immediately a little bit disadvantaged, or sometimes a lot. At the headquarters, you meet people, you can spontaneously talk to them, you're at the heart of the gossip, etc. Now, everybody at the headquarters also has to talk to each other via phone, right? So there is no more spontaneous meeting. So the playing field is really level through virtual working, and borders are gone. And I've noticed that the colleagues and the leaders from the other locations have a much more equal and much more strong voice in calls. And there is not this thing, headquarters versus non-headquarters. So in that sense, I think virtual working has really leveled the playing field. And the last one of the positive aspects, and I loved this one the most, is that leaders are now allowed to show vulnerability. It's really amazing. The crisis has it's almost like given leaders permission to be empathetic and to show vulnerability and to be emotional. So this, I think, is truly a silver lining, and it's something that's really surprised me. So in that vein, I want to go into a couple of things that I've seen at SAP. I'll just name 3 examples of how I've seen that maybe some of the diversity work we've been doing over the past 7 to 10 years has actually been ingrained in the DNA. And I've been so happy to see it. And it's come out during the crisis, whereas before it was kind of, not so obvious. So one is, which I think is a really great example, is that I've seen leaders and HR address very openly all employees. And what I mean by that is that, when we hear stories about Corona and how difficult it is to be in lockdown, most of the time it's about people with kids, how difficult it is with homeschooling and all the challenges, etc. But there's so many other people out there that also need to be looked at. And actually, we have done this, and I think it's amazing. We've over the past few weeks, we've had mails and with actual initiatives going out to fathers at SAP, to single parents at SAP, to colleagues who are taking care of the elderly, and to colleagues who completely live alone. So they've actually created ways for them to connect. So I think this has been really great, and it's nice because it wasn't running under a D&I heading, right? It would just happen naturally. The second one, again, getting back to my favorite topic, leaders. Leaders are actually having calls about how employees feel as the only topic. This is really unheard of before Corona. And again, I feel like the crisis has allowed us to normalize talking about difficulties and challenges and making it okay to show empathy and inclusion. And last but not least, I think if I had a really nice example of how we're leveraging the innovation potential of our diverse workforce. We have this program called 1 Billion Lives at SAP. It's kind of an entrepreneurship program. So people can submit ideas and they can have almost like a little startup within the company if the idea gets accepted. So when the crisis started, or the lockdown really, the program set out a call for ideas to help with COVID, with Corona in any way, shape, or form. And it's been really amazing. In a very, very short amount of time, people from all over the world have gotten together. They've been extremely creative and they've come up with ideas. And they're just starting to release the ideas. And I just thought that was a really, really great example to leverage the diversity in the company, because you can have a lot of diversity, but if you don't leverage it and if you don't practice inclusion, then you're not going to harness the innovative spirit or potential that's in that diversity, right? So overall, to finish, I think D&I in times of Corona is more relevant than ever. And really the long list of examples, negative examples really, that we've heard from Cara, from Josefine, and the ones I've named, show how important it is to keep discussing, to keep raising awareness about this, to keep reflecting on ourselves. And I think most importantly is to stand up for those that are being excluded and harassed. So I don't think diversity should be put back on the back burner at this time at all. In fact, it should be part of the firefighting. But at the same time, I think the crisis is giving us at this moment a once in a lifetime chance to make things better and build on the newfound solidarity, to build on the more level playing field, and to build on the increased empathy. So I truly hope with all my heart that we will keep these things with us even after we get back to normal, if we ever get back to normal, and that we learn from this, and that maybe even in the long run, we make ourselves obsolete as D&I practitioners because it'll just be embedded in everything. So thank you very much for listening. I look forward to answering more questions in the panel. And now I would like to hand over to my panel colleague, Lucia, who will do a much deeper dive on the inclusive leadership aspect of Corona. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, because I was mute. Please let me know if you can see my presentation. Just 1 second. Yeah, I think it's uploading now. So thank you, Tanja, very much. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today, for connecting today. I'm Lucia Gutierrez from Spain, and my professional expertise is on the people arena, especially talent, diversity, and inclusion. And I would like to share with you some ideas and insights about the importance of an inclusive leadership in times of crisis. Both Josephine and Tanja explained clearly that we are in two crises right now. An economic, but a people's crisis too. And when the world around us is uncertain, as it is right now, leadership makes the greatest difference. The decisions that have been taken in the past 3 months and the decisions that will be taken in the upcoming weeks will literally impact on that millions of people live or die. So COVID-19 pandemic is testing world leaders. And when the situation is uncertain, as right now, the human instinct can cause leaders to delay action until the situation becomes clearer. But behaving this manner means that you fail the coronavirus leadership test because you will be losing a precious time. So passing that test requires leaders to act urgently and in a very honest way. It takes a unique kind of leadership to push against the natural tendency to delay decisions. So probably you've seen that so far. If we look at the trends from different countries, we see that we can suggest that the performance of countries with female head of state has been quite positive so far. As you may imagine, this is a very small category because only around 7% of countries in the world are led by women. But so actually it would be really hard to really have a report or with robust data regarding gender differences in leadership performance. But if you see from Germany to New Zealand, Norway, Denmark, or Taiwan, women have managed the COVID crisis quite successfully. Of course, plenty of countries with male leaders have also done well, but few with female leaders have done badly. And if we look at the characteristics and their approach to the global pandemic, I would say, first of all, that decisiveness and anticipation has been key. One of the quickest responses to the pandemic was by Taiwan's female president, Tsai Ing-wen. Her government is receiving a lot of compliments for their decisive and transparent action. The key of her approach to the pandemic has been a very quick reaction, the use of technology to monitor quarantines, and doing a lot of proactive testing. And while half of the world population have been on lockdown, in Taiwan, most residents carry on as normals, and the schools, the restaurants, and the offices are open. Another example is German Chancellor Angela Merkel. She has followed a winning formula of trusting in science, while remaining crystal clear about her government's expectations on the German people. She communicates with scientific rigor, very calmly, and disarming hysteria. So I guess that decisiveness and anticipation have been crucial in this case. But compassion and empathy, and this is something Tanja just mentioned, has been very significant too. We have a lot of examples. A good one is New Zealand Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern. Her kind of approach has won her many fans. I don't know if you have seen her, but it's usual that in her public appearances, which are a masterclass in communication, by the way, she encourages citizens to take care of neighbors and to make sacrifices for the greater good. Another good example is Norway. In this picture, a child is watching Norway's prime minister, that is Erna Solberg. She appeared on television to talk to her country's children, only children. And she answered to the questions, she listened to their fears, and she told them it was okay to feel a little bit scared. If we consider that around 10% of Europe's population is under 14, this is a very interesting initiative to include them, don't you think? So, as probably you know, many female leaders, especially in the workplace, can often be affected by biases. And one of these biases is the one called the double bond bias. And this is a mismatch between what is expected from a leader, to be like assertive, to be rational, to be competent, and what is expected from a woman, to be caring, to be warm, to be sensitive. So what happens with this bias? That women acting like a leader might be disliked, and comments like, she's too ambitious or she's too direct may arise. But on the other hand, if she acts like a woman, she might not be seen as a leader. Maybe you've heard something like, she's too nice or she's too soft. So women sometimes have to choose between being liked but not respected, or being respected but not liked. And what we are seeing with these female leaders is how successful it is to be both kind and decisive. These women are leading the way in showing that these are not competing attributes, but these are complementary attributes, and actually both of them are necessary for a good leadership. So instead of encouraging women to act like male leaders, we should be asking men in power to adopt some of the effective leadership behaviors more commonly found in women. I'm sure you know and that research and studies demonstrate that diverse teams have better performance. But we need to be careful at something. As you can see here in the screen, it says well managed. And well managed is crucial here, because by simply throwing a mix of people together, it doesn't guarantee a high performance. It requires inclusive leadership. And this is something my colleagues have talked before. An inclusive leader assures that all team members feel that they are treated respectfully, that they are valued, and they feel they belong. So in that moment, they are confident, they are inspired. So inclusive leadership is key. And diverse teams that are well managed by inclusive leaders do better than well-managed homogeneous teams. And of course, this has been a very hard time for managers, especially for middle management. I guess one of the greatest challenges that they are facing is understanding the needs and circumstances of all employees. And these employees are diverse in all the traditional measures, but now they are also affected by daily life, work, and family conditions. And on the other hand, these managers are expected to make decisions quickly with incomplete information. And what happens, unfortunately, being in a crisis mode can cause that even the most well-meaning leaders to fall into patterns of bias and exclusion. So I would like to share with you very easy tips for you for practicing daily, for practicing an inclusive leadership in times of crisis. The first one would be to hold regular conversations with each team member to really understand which are their individual circumstances. During all these interactions, be very empathetic, be very understanding. We need to know that a crisis affects employees differently. Don't make assumptions about it without asking. Don't assume, for example, that certain team members are taking on most of the domestic work, or don't assume that some members are feeling less stressed, because it can happen. A second important tip is to have a two-way dialogue on flexibility. having individual discussions with all team members is essential. So you can talk with them about when and where they will work, what support do they need, and what kind of assignments they feel they can manage in the current situation. So as a manager, try to focus on the output and quality rather than in hours or availability. And finally, very important, understand how gender bias may show up. Leaders need to be aware that when teams are working from home and conducting business through calls and virtual meetings, they need to be especially alert to bias and avoid making assumptions about the team members. To put an example, imagine that you're a manager and you have an important assignment that must be completed tomorrow, and two people from your team are very prepared for it. Both of them, of course, are working from home, but one of them is single and the other one has 2 children at home because there is no schools. So who will you get the opportunity to shine to do this assignment? If you immediately choose the person that is single without giving a serious thought, then you may be demonstrating unconscious bias. Or for example, don't assume that women prefer to work from home rather than going to the office. So in closing, COVID-19 has not just changed the world, but also changed the DNA of our workplace ecosystems in many ways. And our leaders must change as well to lead effectively in this new era. If this pandemic experience has taught us something, is that inclusive leadership matters. And for many organizations that are facing an uncertain future, it may matter more than ever right now. So the world needs leaders that help countries, that help businesses to respond to this crisis, to recover and to thrive later. And we need to remember that the overwhelming effects of a crisis like this takes leaderships back to the most fundamental element, that is making a positive difference in people's lives. So thank you so much for your attention. And now I will hand over to Grace again, because I think we have a panel discussion.
Thanks, Lucia. And thanks, Josephine, Tanja, and Lucia again for this brilliant presentation of your visions and experiences. So now that we are even more aware about the importance of diversity and inclusion to overcome this crisis, let's talk about what we need to consider to bring diversity and inclusion to the next level in organizations and in our governments. So I would like to raise the first question for Josephine. So Josephine, you have shared with us about how to accelerate the diversity and inclusion learning curve. But the question is, who are the main stakeholders in organizations and governments? And what is it for them?
Yeah, so your question is interesting because you asked me who the stakeholders are. First of all, I think when you transfer knowledge and you don't reinvent the wheel again and again, but you accelerate a learning curve, in this case, the people who benefit from it are the underrepresented people. And in any country that can be different. So in Switzerland, for example, we have 4 languages, and the dominant language is the Swiss Germanic language. That's where the economic power is, Zurich, Basel, Bern. And what we see is that the French speaking and the Italian and the Romansh speaking are not represented very well in leadership positions. So in this country, it would be underrepresented people. In other countries, it can be color, age, nationality. It can be an intersection of these things, of course. But I think you need to look at what in your specific country requires most attention. I think everybody knows Switzerland is not leading when it comes to women in leadership, despite having many women ministers, and our president this year is a female as well. In terms of in the organization, who the leading drivers can be, I truly think that heads of diversity and inclusion have an amazing amount of knowledge, and this knowledge can be used at a broader spectrum. When I worked at DSM as their head of culture transformation and head of D&I, I worked on a team that sat with the government once a quarter and helped discuss what the government could do differently, and other corporations, other big, large global Dutch corporations were present. So heads of D&I, I think if they have the seniority, can do this type of work with governments. Otherwise, I think it needs to be people who are respected and have the credibility when they walk in the room. That's why I also said heads of finance. What's important is that you come with real data, not just a lot of talk. We did this, we did that, but you can really demonstrate that the steps that you took had tangible results in terms of output. And I think, you know, a government is always interested in growing its GDP, so that's a real driver. To summarize, people with credibility within an organization need to step in the room with the government, and the people who benefit from that are really all citizens of a country, and especially the underrepresented members.
Thanks. And I would like to ask you something else. For example, a lot of people are listening to us at this moment, and I mean, all of us, we are lucky that we have a diversity and inclusion lead in our organizations. But how about the medium-sized or small companies where don't have this privilege? How to, if our audience will leave this, you know, this session inspired, feeling like they want to do something in their organizations, what would you suggest to them if, in case that they don't have a diversity and inclusion leader, let's say?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, because I actually run into that a lot in my private consultancy. And what you see is when I speak to medium-sized organizations, I encourage them to either bring in an external person to help them kick off, and then they can take over within a year or 6 months, or failing that, to combine roles, make the person who's in charge of talent responsible for inclusion and diversity, or make the head of HR responsible in addition to the full day job of inclusion and diversity, because I&D or D&I is not something you do apart. It truly is something that ought to be embedded in your systems and processes, and therefore it's not additional work, but it is truly about changing processes that in many cases already exist.
Excellent, thank you. Thanks a lot, Josephine. And due to the time, I would like to go to the next question. And my next question is for Tanja. Tanja, during your presentation, you mentioned how is COVID-19 providing new opportunities. Could you please give some more examples about these opportunities that we have?
Yes, I would love to. Excuse me. So I've mentioned the gender side already. And although, as I was saying, that in Germany, there is a big discussion going on whether women are carrying the brunt of the corona strategy of the government, in my daily interactions with colleagues and customers and different people in tech, I've also seen the flip side of this. So I've seen that virtual working is providing more flexibility, and being at home, especially with the partner, also provides new opportunities. So I think it's very difficult if the partner is at home, even if he hasn't, speaking of same-sex couples right now, if it's been a traditional partnership and he has sort of been doing the work and she the housework and working, I think being at home together all day long for weeks at end, I think it's hard for any man who sees all the work that's happening not to pitch in. And I've seen this happening. I've seen men take on more responsibility where they haven't before, giving, on top of the virtual working, giving the women more flexibility. And I was saying before, now, of course, whilst kids are still at home, it's women have, or our female colleagues have much more flexibility to join the calls in the afternoon and in the evening. So they're much more included in many more calls where decisions are made, instead of always being limited to just the first half of the day. So that's one aspect I've seen. I've also heard a lot about how differently abled people are benefiting from the virtual environments that we're all living in right now. So there's many differently able people who can never leave the house, who are really housebound, And things like, I've read several articles on this actually, things like going to museums or going to concerts is not possible for them. But with the crisis, there's been so much creativity. We now have virtual museum visits, we have virtual concerts, we have virtual doctor's visits, and it's opening up a whole new world to differently able people. And what I've also heard is that now others understand what they live on a daily basis. So there's a lot more empathy towards differently abled people. And Cara was saying at the beginning also, just looking at this conference, right? Before, if this would have happened in person, many could not have traveled to it because some don't have budget to travel. Some can because they're taking care of somebody at home. And this is, again, a nice example of how virtual levels the playing field. I think many people that wouldn't have been able to come to this conference had it been physical are able to join now from around the world. So those are some of the silver linings that I'm seeing. And yeah, as the flip side of all the other aspects.
The bright side of the situation.
The bright side of the situation.
I am very happy. Thanks, Tanya. And I'm very happy that you also mentioned creativity, because I think, when you look to all the offer on social media, you can, for example, see new solutions, services that are raising as a result of this crisis. For example, something simple, masks. The people is designing masks with designs to make it a little bit more friendly for the rest, or maybe the creation of applications to help people to identify where they can have more risks.
Yeah.
So which advice would you give to women to take these opportunities? Because we're looking to these opportunities, but which advice would you give to women that are listening to us at this moment?
I would definitely say, if you're home with your partner, don't be afraid to load some of the work off onto the partner and divide up the work, so to free up space for you to also raise your hand for projects, for example, or to go into that call in the afternoon, and really kind of stake your claim to also being able to participate in company life and working on your career. That's definitely, I think the opportunity is there. And the biggest advice I would say is grab it while it's here. And of course, hold on to it for after the crisis.
Great closing. Sorry,
Grace, I'm sorry, could I add something? Because
sure.
What Tanya said, I think it's really important. And I think if we think about remote working as a kind of new standard, a lot of collateral opportunities appear, as Tanya was saying. And in my case, as I've been working in the talent field for a long time, I see one that could be a huge opportunity. And as you all know, companies are facing a great challenge, that is the lack of talent. There is a huge war for talent out there. And I think one of the main reasons is because at the moment, most companies are managing a very limited talent pool. Basically, they are considering people that is living in the same city where the office is, or people that want to move, is willing to move to that city. So nowadays, the talent pool they are managing is very limited. But if we consider remote working as a massive scale, the opportunities are very, very good. And it could give a bigger and more diverse talent pool for companies. So I think that's a huge opportunity in terms of diversity and talent too.
Thanks for that addition, Lucia. And adding on that contribution, I would like to ask you, what kind of new and successful leadership and skills and practices have you identified during this crisis?
Yes, I think we've seen plenty of successful practices and skills during this time, because I do really believe that in hard times get out the best of people. But just to mention a couple of examples, I would say that adaptability and reinvention have been absolutely key. I guess that for most people and companies, when everything started, we thought this was like a short-term thing, like a 2-month thing. So plans and projects were delayed for a while. But however, as the weeks went by, we realized that it was very real, very serious. It was not a short-term thing. So I've been amazed at how people and companies have reacted very fast. They have reacted like in very creative ways to adapt to the situation, to connect with the customers differently, offering new value. Tanja just said about, for example, the cultural sector, how they reinvented with these virtual meetings like concerts and so on. We can think about hotels that have turned into hospitals, or restaurants that are starting offering delivery from one day to another. So that's been key. But another one that I would like to highlight is solidarity, because we've seen it across companies, across individuals. And I think that when we have a common purpose, it's amazing the things we can do. We've seen citizens self-organized, sewing face masks or making protection material with 3D printers, or we've seen giant companies as Cara, for Spanish brand Inditex, using their logistics and factories to make protective clothes, or telecommunications companies offering free data for the customers. So there are millions of examples like this, and I do feel really, really proud about it. And I think it's a win-win formula for both companies and the society. So I love that one.
Yeah, and I wanted to add one, which I've seen happen. I mean, we've in theory talked a lot about it at SAP, about failure culture, but now I see it being really lived. So a lot of the leaders are practicing empathy and sort of permission almost, or understanding that, you know, if you couldn't finish a project, or I don't know, your kid runs through the camera, or something is not perfect, that it's okay, and that we can actually learn from it. So I've seen this failure culture, which we've been talking about a lot, really come to life and really being lived. So I think that's a great leadership skill to have, to allow this and accept it and build on it, and allow your employees to learn from it also.
Great addition, Tanja, thanks. And I also would like to give some space to a question from our audience. Marjet is asking, why do we see so many institutions in the current context of the worldwide pandemic forget that diverse teams outperform others? I mean, we know that this is a great benefit to have a diverse teams, but yeah, why in this situation some organizations forget it?
I think I'll give it a shot. I'm happy to pass on afterwards. I think that what we're seeing is a very instinctive behavior. Diversity and inclusion is difficult to drive forward because we have a brain, and our brain controls us. So unconsciously we do and say things, and we act in ways that may actually not be conducive to driving diversity and inclusion forward. And so exclusive behaviors come to the front when we see groups being threatened, and the in-group, or the group that holds the power, has built organizations mostly for them. They've developed a culture and behaviors that promotes that in-group over and over again. And so when moments get rough, that in-groups flocks together and starts to protect itself. And I know this sounds very theoretical, but there's so much social research that has been done on this very point, that every head of diversity and inclusion is intimately familiar with that behavior. That's why we talk so much about inclusive leadership, and how you have to be first aware of these behaviors that we all have, myself included, and how you can take a step back and reassess and rethink. And if that is not enough, then you have people around you, heads of D&I partners, HRBPs, other people who can actually help you recalibrate what you can do differently in these moments. And so one of the things that was addressed earlier is this inclusive leadership behavior, or inclusiveness. And memories are short in corporations and everywhere. We tend to forget things that don't feel comfortable and things that we don't necessarily like to do. And driving both inclusion and diversity is about stepping out of your comfort zone. It is about stretching the envelope time and time again. And so when it's convenient to forget it, we quickly fall back into our behaviors. And so I think, honestly, that's what we're seeing. We've seen it in difficult times before. that's why I'm so strongly promoting the fact that we shouldn't have to reinvent the wheel, but we should take that knowledge that already exists today and hand it over and collaborate together so that we can eliminate these inequalities.
Great, great. And I would like to wrap up with sorry, can you mute your microphones because I hear?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Thank you. Okay, thanks for that, all of you. I would like to wrap up because we need to close this session, but with my key takeaways. So we need to bring diversity and inclusion to the table, period. We shouldn't be afraid. As Tanja mentioned, we need to claim our space at home, other organizations. Again, don't be shy, don't be afraid. Leaders has an important role, and the failure culture stimulates development of these opportunities, and we also have heard about the importance of an inclusive leadership. Thanks for this, ladies, Josefine, Tanja, and Lucia. And now we need to close this session. I really would like to thank to everybody, starting with the organization of this event. So I would like to thank Ayumi Moore. I would like to thank also Joanna Carson, Cara, Antoine, and Karina van Meijeren. And of course, I would like to thank our audience for your time and energy to be here. And to all great speakers and panelists, Josefine van Zanten, Tanja Kaufmann, and Lucia Gutierrez, Marjet Wijn, and my dear colleague, Evelyn Jessurun. Thanks a lot for this time, and don't forget to stay safe.
Thank
And
you.
a big thanks to you, Grace.
Thank you.
You did a great job.
Done. Well done, everyone. Take care. Stay healthy. Stay healthy. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.